If I told you a woman was auctioned off in the middle of the town square with her 5 children, would you believe it? Because this story happened in a place forgotten by time, where poverty screamed louder than justice, and desperation silenced even hope. Before we begin, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, what kind of story moves your heart the most? Forbidden's love? Overcoming the odds? Unexpected reunions? Your answer helps us bring you more stories that truly touch and transform. Now take a deep breath, because what you're about to hear will shake you to your core. Lorena held tightly to her youngest son's hand, their bare feet sinking into the dry dirt of the square. Her eyes were bloodshot, not just from crying, but from sleepless nights searching for a way out. Around them, a crowd gathered like it was some cruel spectacle. An officer was reading names, a list of the indebted set to be auctioned that morning. An auction of people, that's right. A shameful ritual where lives were sold in exchange for shelter, food, and silence. That was all that remained for those who had lost everything. Beside Lorena stood her 5 children, small, thin, and terrified. The eldest, Raul, tried to hold the group together with the strength of his gaze. The middle child, Mel, whispered, asking if this was really necessary. Lorena didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat was locked tight, as if any word would collapse into sobs. She didn't want to be there. But ever since her husband died in a work accident and the house was swallowed by unpayable debts, she'd had no other choice. It was this, or be torn away from her children forever. The auctioneer raised his voice. Mother with 5 children, all healthy, all able to work. Let's start the bidding at 100 reais. No one moved. The silence was more violent than the whispers. The looks were filled with contempt, as if Lorena and her children were nothing but a burden. Some chuckled. Others shook their heads in pity. But no one placed a bid. The price dropped to 50, then 20, until it hit the unthinkable, 5 reais. The price of a cheap meal, the cost of misery. Lorena closed her eyes. She no longer felt shame, only fear. Then, from the back of the crowd, a dry voice cut through the air. I'll give 5. Everyone turned at once. A tall man, wearing an old hat and a worn-out shirt, stood with his hand raised. His face was hard as stone, his eyes unreadable. No one knew where he came from or what he did, but there he was, buying a woman and 5 children for a pitiful price. Sold, declared the auctioneer, slamming the gavel. Lorena lowered her head, feeling the world spin around her, while her children clung to each other like it was the end of everything. The man said nothing. He simply turned and started walking. Lorena understood. She followed, her children trailing behind like a sad procession. His steps were steady but unhurried. He carried the weight of something no one else could comprehend. And even without turning back, Lorena sensed that he knew exactly what he was doing. But why? Why would someone buy 6 strangers and take them to a farm in the middle of nowhere? What she felt was fear. But there was also, almost imperceptibly, hope. Along the way, no one spoke. Only the sound of footsteps and wind. Lorena tried to stay strong, but her chest felt like glass. Every breath was an effort. Every glance at her children, a silent promise. They were walking into the unknown, toward a future sold for 5 reais and cloaked in mystery. But one thing she knew for sure. Whatever that man's reason was, she was going to find out. And so began the hardest chapter of her life. Or maybe the one that would change everything. The road was long and covered in dust. The sky, a cloudless sheet, reflected the dry heat that punished every step. Lorena carried Sophia in her arms, the youngest, while the others struggled to keep pace with the man walking ahead. His name was still a mystery, not a word, not a gesture. He just kept walking, leading them as if everything had been planned. Raul, the oldest of the children, whispered into his mother's ear, "Is he going to hurt us?" Lorena didn't answer. Deep down, she didn't know what to expect from such heavy silence. When they arrived at the farm, the wooden gate hung slightly open, creaking with the slightest breeze. The place looked frozen in time. Rusted fences, dry trees, and a worn-down wooden house at the center of the property. The man pushed the gate open with ease, signaled for them to enter, and kept walking without a word. The children's eyes widened. To them, it felt like walking into the set of a horror movie. But Lorena just tightened her grip on her daughter and moved forward. There was no turning back. This was their home now, no matter how cruel it seemed. Inside the house, the scent of old wood mixed with damp earth created a somber atmosphere. The man removed his hat for the first time and set it on the table. "You'll stay here. Tomorrow we talk." His voice was deep, dry, as if speaking was something he avoided. Lorena nodded, trying to hide the tremble in her voice. The man climbed a side staircase and vanished behind a wooden door. For a few seconds, only the children's breathing and the wind rattling the broken windows could be heard. Lorena looked around. There was only a thin mattress on the floor and a few old blankets. The cracked walls seemed to have witnessed more tragedies than any of them could imagine. Still, she smiled at her children and said, "Let's get everything organized, okay? It's going to be all right." The children, though scared, believed her. That woman with the tired eyes and soft voice was all they had. That night, they slept huddled together on the mattress, while moonlight slipped through the cracks in the door. Wood, casting its glow over a scene filled with uncertainty. The next morning, a loud noise outside startled them awake. It was the sound of hoes striking earth. Lorena jumped up, opened the door, and saw the man already working. He moved the soil with precision, like someone who had done it for years. When he noticed her watching, he simply said, "Dress the kids. Today they learn to work." Lorena swallowed hard. She was grateful for the opportunity, but scared he might expect too much from the little ones. "Even so," she replied, "Yes, sir," and began dressing the children with the few clothes they had. For the next few hours, silence remained the only form of communication. The man, still unnamed, showed them the chicken coop, the dried out, garden beds, and the barn. No smiles, no gestures, but also no yelling, no insults. It was as if the only emotion he allowed himself was neutrality. Lorena tried to read him, but the more she observed, the more confused she became. Who was this man who bought a family for 5 reais, yet didn't touch them, didn't ask questions, and couldn't even smile at a child? It was at dusk that, for the first time, he stopped what he was doing and looked straight at Lorena. "What? Are your children's names?" he asked, his voice still coated with coldness. She answered calmly, one by one. "Raul, Maria, Mel, Lucas, and Sophia." The man simply nodded and went back to work. But in that moment, something shifted. Lorena felt that the stone wall had moved, ever so slightly. And she knew there was a secret behind that silence, something he guarded fiercely. And maybe it was more dangerous than it seemed. His name came days later, like a word drifting on the wind. Elias. Raul was the first to hear it, when a distant neighbor stopped by to drop off some tools at the farm. "Tell Elias everything's here," the man had said. From that moment, the name took shape. Elias. A simple name, yet it carried something far deeper beneath the surface. Lorena repeated it in her mind, as if saying it enough times might help her decipher the mystery of the man who had bought her. He explained nothing, but noticed everything, every step the children took. Every attempt she made to help, every silent act of affection. The days began to fall into a strange but bearable routine. In the mornings, the children tended to the yabas, chicken coop and garden. In the afternoons, they cleaned the stables and carried buckets of water. Elias came and went with the same coldness as always. He never sat at the table, never ate with them, but he left food, bread, milk, never too much, never with warmth. But he left it. Lorena understood it for what it was, a silent agreement. They existed, and somehow he sustained that existence. One night, the sky broke open with thunder, and the farm was plunged into darkness. The children cried, frightened by the lightning that lit up the house like flashes of painful memories. Lorena tried to calm them when suddenly the door burst open. Elias, soaked from the rain, stepped inside with dry firewood in his arms and a lantern in hand. He lit the wood-burning stove without saying a word. But in that gesture, in that urgency to protect the warmth of the house, there was more meaning than any words could have offered. Lorena looked at him for a long moment, and for the first time, she thought she saw sadness in his eyes. The next day, she decided to thank him. She prepared a warm soup with the little they had. When Elias returned from the field, he found the bowl placed on the table. "It's for you," Lorena said. He hesitated, looked at the bowl as if it were a dangerous gift. Then he sat down, ate in silence, but he ate. The children watched him as if witnessing a statue come to life. And Lorena realized, behind all that rigidity, he carried a wound. It wasn't rudeness. It was protection. He was someone who, at some point, had lost everything just like her. That same night, after the children were asleep, Lorena stepped outside to gather firewood. On her way back, she noticed a faint light coming from the barn. Curious, she approached, quietly, and peeked through the wooden slats. Inside, Elias knelt before a makeshift altar, a photo in his hands, a portrait of a woman holding a baby. His hands trembled. He didn't pray. He just looked and cried. Lorena backed away, her chest tight from witnessing something so personal. She returned home silently, telling no one. But the image wouldn't leave her mind. The next day, everything was just as before. Elias was serious. The children worked. Silence reigned. But now, Lorena knew. He had lost someone. And maybe that's why he had bought an entire family knot. Out of kindness, not out of need, but out of guilt. Out of absence, as if it were a broken attempt at redemption. She still didn't know the whole story, but she felt herself getting closer to the truth. And the closer she got, the more afraid she was of what she might uncover. It was on an ordinary morning, just like any other, that everything began to change. Sophia, the youngest, wandered off for a few minutes into the field. When Lorena found her near the well, the girl was holding the same photo Elias kept hidden in the barn. The little one said, "Mommy, this lady looks like me." Lorena froze. The photo was damp. The secret Elias had buried so deeply was now in the hands of a child, and it was only the beginning of what was about to unfold. Lorena's heart pounded as if it might tear through her chest. She gently took the photo from Sophia's hands, eyes wide as she noticed the frightening resemblance between her daughter and the woman in the picture. The eyes, the shape of the face, even the delicate way she held the baby. It was like a grown-up version of Sophia herself. Lorena's head spun. This couldn't be a coincidence. Who was this woman to Elias? Why was he hiding the photo? And most disturbing of all, why did she look so much like Sophia? Something was very wrong with this story. That afternoon, Elias returned from the fields earlier than usual. Sweat dripped from his brow, and his expression was even colder than normal. Lorena thought about confronting him, but something held her back. He walked past her like a cold gust of wind, entered the barn, locked the door. On instinct, she followed, the photo tucked in the pocket of her dress. Pressing her ear to the wood, she heard a broken whisper. "Forgive me. I couldn't save you." The ground vanished beneath her feet. Elias had lost someone. Maybe. 2 people died the next day. The tension on the farm was unbearable. The children felt it. Raul avoided speaking. Mel didn't want to leave the room. The silence now weighed differently, like a storm on the verge of breaking. Determined, Lorena decided to confront Elias. She approached while he was feeding the pigs and, without hesitation, held the photo out to him. "Who is she?" she asked. Elias froze. His eyes locked on the image. His hand trembled. Breath caught at his chest. "My wife. And my daughter. They both died, burned 5 years ago. Inside this house." Lorena's world crumbled with the confession. He continued, his voice cracking for the first time. "I went to the river to fetch water. When I came back, there was only smoke and screaming. The man who had always been made of stone was now flesh, blood, and sorrow. After that, I couldn't look anyone in the eye again. Not until I saw you in that square. It felt like life was giving me a second chance to protect what I'd lost." Lorena listened in silence. She was scared, yes, but she also felt compassion. Elias wasn't a monster. He was a broken man, and maybe, like her, just trying to survive. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay awake, watching her children one by one, thinking, was it really fate? Could someone up above have wanted them to meet? The image of the girl in the photo, so much like Sophia, kept returning. Fate was cruel, but sometimes it knew how to piece broken things back together. The next morning, Lorena left a bowl of coffee on Elias's porch. This time with a handwritten note. "We can't always save the ones we love, but we can still save ourselves." Elias didn't respond, but that afternoon, he appeared at the door with a set of clean clothes for the children. He called each one by name, and almost imperceptibly, he smiled. It was the first time he had done that. Lorena felt a strange warmth in her chest, as if something inside her had quietly come to life. There was still mistrust, fear, and scars. But for the first time, there was also room for something new. And it was at that exact moment that a shadow appeared down the road, riding toward the farm. A man, and with him, an envelope. Lorena didn't know it yet, but that visitor was about to bring news that would turn everything upside down. The horse stopped at the fence with a low neigh, as if it sensed the weight of what it carried. The man dismounted, removed his hat respectfully, and walked toward the porch where Lorena was hanging freshly washed clothes. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of his worn leather uniform typical of regional officers. In his hand, a crumpled envelope marked by dust and time. "I'm looking for Elias da Cruz," he said in a firm tone. Lorena swallowed hard. Elias appeared at the barn door just seconds later, his expression harder than ever. The silence between the two men felt like an invisible duel. The visitor handed over the envelope without saying another word. Elias took the paper with heavy hands, breaking the seal with his calloused thumb. He read it once, then again, and then, as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet, he stepped back twice. His usually unreadable face twisted into something. Between fury, pain, and disbelief, "They found," he muttered. Lorena tried to approach, but he turned away and headed toward the field without a word. The messenger lingered for a moment, visibly uncomfortable, before leaving with a brief nod. Lorena rushed to the envelope, left behind on the porch chair. Her heart pounded like a war drum. Inside was a legal letter and a black and white photo. A man in a suit standing next to an elderly woman. At the bottom, it read, "Heirship claim in the name of Sophia Almeida Cruz." Lorena felt her soul leave her body. That last name Cruz, Elias's last name, and Sophia, her daughter. She dropped into the chair, the paper trembling in her hands. The puzzle pieces were coming together, but the picture they formed was more disturbing than anything she had imagined. That night, Elias didn't return home. The children asked about him, restless. Raul wanted to go look for him. Lorena told them to stay where they were. She knew Elias needed time, but inside her, the questions could no longer be ignored. Why did Sophia have the same name as Elias's supposedly dead daughter? Could it be that the little girl was somehow the child everyone thought had died? A swap? A mistake? Or something far darker? The only certainty was that the past was about to crash into the present in the most devastating way. The next day, Elias returned, with hollow eyes, unshaven face, and a soul heavy with grief. He sat in front of Lorena and finally spoke directly. Without hesitation, "The child you call Sophia is not your daughter." The words struck like lightning. The children froze, as if time itself had stopped. Lorena's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" I gave birth to that girl." Elias shook his head. "You were deceived? 5 years ago, during the fire, my wife and daughter disappeared. The child's body was never found. And now the DNA test confirms Sophia is my daughter." Lorena staggered back as if struck. Her whole body trembled. "That's impossible. Impossible. She's mine. I nursed her. I've cared for her since she was a baby." Elias, his voice tight, replied, "I know. But she was taken from me that night and placed in the arms of a stranger. You." The revelation tore through. Everything. What was real? What was a lie? Sophia, the daughter she loved with all her soul, now belonged to someone else. But what hurt even more was the thought that she might be taken away. And Elias, still composed, added, "And now the court wants her back." Lorena's legs gave out. The children gathered around her in silence. Sophia, confused, simply hugged her tightly. "I'm your daughter, Mommy. I am, right?" The pain in that question was pure poison. Lorena looked at Elias with tear-filled eyes. "You can't do this." But he didn't respond. He just stood up, heart torn, and walked into the house. And in that moment, Lorena knew the hardest fight of her life was just beginning. That night, the silence was unbearable. Not even the sound of owls or the rustling trees could fill the emptiness that had taken over the house. Lorena gently ran her fingers through Sophia's hair as the little girl slept in her lap, unaware of the storm building around her. Elias's words echoed in her mind. "Sophia is my daughter." But how could she accept that? How could she accept that the child she had nursed with her own body, rocked through the coldest nights and comforted, through fevers, could now be ripped from her arms because of a piece of paper and a genetic test? The other children were in shock too. Raul watched his mother in silence, as if he already understood everything and knew she carried a heavy burden. Mel had cried herself to sleep. Lucas, curled up in the corner of the mattress, clutched a toy. Truck Elias had given him weeks earlier. Even that now felt strange. Lorena wondered if Elias had planned all of this from the start. Had he gone to that plaza only for Sophia? Or had it been coincidence? Doubt and anger churned in her chest like a slow-working, poisoned-out Elias, meanwhile, remained on the porch in the dark, sitting silently with his eyes fixed on the horizon, like a man waiting for a miracle or an absolution that would never come. In his hands, the photo of his dead daughter, or rather, the daughter he had found. Every detail of that night returned to him. The smell of smoke, the unbearable heat, the screams he couldn't reach. He had buried an empty box, a symbolic grave, a morning without a body. And now, 5 years later, fate had placed that little girl in front of him, again alive, smiling, calling another woman Ma. At dawn, Lorena made a decision. She stepped onto the porch, her face exhausted, but her voice steady. "If you take my daughter away, Elias, I'll die inside. You may have the legal right, but she doesn't know you. She doesn't love you. I'm her home." Elias didn't answer right away. His eyes were red, still heavy with the guilt of a man too broken to show emotion. "I didn't ask for this, Lorena. I just wanted to understand, to be sure. And now that I don't know what to do anymore." The silence between them was a battlefield where no one dared to fire the first shot. Lorena knelt before him, her eyes overflowing with pain. "Don't take her from me. Don't do to her what the world did to you." Elias turned his face away, clenching his fists. "And what am I supposed to do with this truth? Bury it? Pretend she's not my daughter? That my wife didn't die believing our child had turned to ashes?" Lorena whispered, "No, you don't have to bury it, but you don't have to destroy another life just to ease your own pain." His breath caught. For the first time, it seemed the wall was about to break. That same afternoon, a black car appeared on the road, slowly climbing the dusty hill that led to the farm. Lorena froze. The social worker had come to take the girl. Elias stood from his chair and walked toward the gate. The confrontation was inevitable. One signature, one form, and everything would change. But no one expected what he would do next. As he opened the gate, Elias looked the woman in the eye and said, "Go back and tell them she wasn't found." The social worker's eyes widened. "But sir, that's illegal." He simply replied, "Sometimes justice is in the wrong hands. And I won't make the same mistake twice." Lorena, hearing this, ran to the porch, stunned. The car turned around and drove off. Elias slowly turned back and looked at her, with the expression of someone who had finally made peace with his own ghosts. But what did that gesture mean? Was it renunciation? Love? Guilt? Lorena didn't know yet. But something had changed. And maybe, for the first time since the auction, it finally felt like this house could become a home. The sun dipped slowly behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of fire and ash, as if even it knew that day wasn't just another. Lorena was in the kitchen, slicing what little cassava was left for dinner, but her hands were trembling. What Elias had done wasn't just a gesture. It was a rupture. He defied the law, his own traumas, and the truth he'd spent years chasing off for a child who called someone else Mom. But why? She wondered if it came from guilt, or if something stronger was at play, something even he couldn't put into words. Elias stayed out late that evening. He didn't eat, didn't speak to anyone. He sat by the garden, arms resting on his knees, staring at the soil like he expected an answer to grow from it. Lorena watched him from a distance. She wanted to approach him, to say she understood. But deep down, she felt that this battle was his to fight. All she could do now was protect the children and hope that, eventually, silence would reveal more than words ever could. Sophia slept clutching a cloth doll Mel had sewn, innocent, unaware of the heavy weight of the adult world. In the days that followed, something began to shift in the house. Elias was more present, not just in body, but in his actions. He took the children to feed the animals, taught Lucas how to strap the saddle on the horse, helped Maria plant beans. He was still the same quiet man, but his eyes now held something else, perhaps peace, perhaps regret. Raoul, who had always looked at him with suspicion, began following him across the fields, hanging on to every word. It was as if a new cycle was taking root, fragile, but possible. Lorena wondered if this was temporary, a redemptive impulse, a fleeting sense of relief. But when she saw Elias with his own hands building a little wooden coop for the chickens. While Sophia danced around him with flowers in her hair, she realized it was real. He was opening up slowly, like someone who doesn't know how to love but wants to try. And that, to her, was worth more than any signed paper, because forced love never takes root. But love that is earned, that one blooms even in the driest. Soiled on one particularly cold night, Lorena woke to the sound of rain tapping against the roof. She got up to close the window and found Elias in the kitchen, wrapped in a blanket, holding a steaming mug. Their eyes met. Neither spoke for a few seconds. Then she asked, "Why did you send that woman away?" Elias took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the steam rising from his drink. "Because I realized what I lost wasn't just my daughter. It was my ability to protect someone. And she already has someone who does that for her." Her response was a silence full of gratitude. She sat beside him, wrapped in quiet. It wasn't love yet. It wasn't a promise. But it was something real, something built from pain and the improbable. Elias handed her the mug. "Here, warms you from the inside." Lorena took it with both hands, her fingers brushing against his, and in that simple gesture, something passed between them more powerful than any declaration. The night passed slowly, with the sound of rain cradling two strangers who no longer felt so distant, but neither of them knew. The past wasn't finished with them yet. And what was coming in the next few days would put everything at risk once again. The silence of the night was shattered by a sharp scream. Lorena jolted awake, heart pounding. She ran to the children's room and found Raul standing at the door, pointing to the window. "There's someone outside," the boy whispered, pale. As a ghost, Lorena crept forward, eyes scanning the darkness. And then she saw it, two hooded figures moving near the barn. Ice ran through her veins. In that instant, she knew something was about to explode. And this time, Elias might not be. Able to protect them, she rushed to the front door, where Elias was already emerging with a rifle in hand. He didn't ask a thing. He just pointed firmly, ordering her to stay inside with the children. His eyes were no longer those of a wounded man. They were the eyes of someone who knew danger, someone who had been waiting for this. Lorena tried to stop him, but he was resolute. "Lock the door, and don't open it, no matter what." His voice was sharp, final. Lorena obeyed, but her chest felt ready to burst. She gathered the children and prayed in silence. Outside, Elias walked with steady steps, eyes alert. The figures fled into the brush as soon as they saw him, but they had left a message nailed to the chicken coop door with a rusted knife. Elias tore it down and read aloud in a low growl. "You can hide the truth, Elias, but it always finds a way to show up. V." The shaky, almost childish handwriting was one he'd recognize anywhere. His hands curled into fists. He knew who V was, and that could only mean one thing. The past was back, and it had come to collect what remained. The next morning, Elias was different. His gaze was darker, his steps short, his hands restless. Lorena stared at him over breakfast, but he said nothing. Until, just before heading out to the field, he muttered over his shoulder, "If I don't come back by nightfall, run with them. Go east. Follow the river trail." She sprang to her feet. "What do you mean? What's happening, Elias?" "Who were those people?" He paused, took a deep breath, and said, "Someone who never accepted the loss. Someone who believed Sophia was his." Lorena froze. The world spun around her. Her mind scrambled to connect the pieces. Sophia had been taken from the fire, but then, was she kidnapped before ending up in Lorena's arms? And if so, why? Elias gave no more answers. He just walked out with the rifle on his back and the look of a man saying goodbye. The house sank into heavy tension. The children knew nothing, but they felt the weight in the air. Raoul, more mature now, helped his mother board up the windows and doors with old planks and nails. Mel whispered prayers under her breath. Sophia played with her doll, unaware that her fate was once again hanging by a thread. The hours crawled by. The afternoon vanished under thick clouds, and night fell with no sign of Elias. Lorena tried to stay calm, but her eyes never left the road, until, around midnight, a horse appeared on the hill. But it wasn't Elias riding. It was a hooded man, his face cloaked in shadow, holding something in his arms. A body. Lorena rushed out, Raoul close behind. As they approached, the figure looked up with trembling voice and said, "He saved you. But now it's your turn to save him." Lorena froze when she saw the blood dripping down Elias's side. The rider, a thin man, marked by anguish and eyes heavy with guilt, dismounted clumsily and laid Elias down on the porch floor. "He found me before I could do anything. He took the knife meant for you." The revelation hit like a punch. Lorena dropped to her knees, fingers trembling as she pressed the wound of the man who, not long ago, had been a stranger, and now was the bond holding her entire family together. "Elias, stay with me. You're not going to die," she pleaded. As his eyes began to lose focus, Raoul ran to fetch water. Mel looked for clean cloths, and Lucas, though still too young to grasp what was happening, held Elias's hand tightly. The wounded man tried to speak, but no sound came out. Lorena, crying, begged him not to talk, just breathe. The visitor, V, stood silently, eyes fixed on the darkness, as if expecting someone else to come and finish the job. The truth is that Sophia was never supposed to die in that fire. She was taken by me out of fear, out of madness. I thought if I pulled her from the flames, I could protect her. But I was a coward, and I left her with strangers. Lorena stared at him in shock. "You kidnapped my daughter?" "No," he answered, voice cracking. "She was already with a woman. Desperate, holding a baby, not knowing what to do. I gave Sophia to her and ran." Lorena's face fell. She remembered the woman who knocked on her door 5 years ago, bloody, holding a newborn, saying she couldn't take care of the child anymore, and how Lorena, without hesitation, took that baby in as her own. "So, the Sophia I raised came from all that chaos?" "No," Elias whispered, barely audible. "She was our redemption." The night felt endless. Elias was laid gently on makeshift blankets as Lorena cleaned the wound with trembling hands. He squeezed her fingers with what little strength he had left. "I thought I bought you that day, but it was you who saved me." The words were soft, but cut through the air like arrows. "You gave me the will to live again." Lorena cried quietly, resting her head on his chest. That confession wasn't romantic. It was raw. It was from someone who had given up on everything until he was confronted with what hurt the most, the chance to begin again. Sophia, awakened by the commotion, appeared at the door and saw Elias wounded. She walked over slowly, clutching her. "Doll, is he going to die, Mommy?" The question echoed through the whole house. Lorena took a deep breath, looked at Elias, and at her daughter. "No, because he still has something to live for." Sophia knelt beside him, touched his hand, and said, with the innocence only a child can have, "If you want, you can be my daddy too," Elias cried, for the first time, without fear, without shame. The armor had finally fallen. The cold closed off. Solitary man was now just a heart crying out for forgiveness. The night passed like a rite of passage. No one slept. The visitor disappeared into the darkness, as if his mission was complete. By morning, Elias was still breathing. weak, but alive, and a promise had been made without needing to be spoken. He was no longer alone. Nor was Lorena, nor the children. They were, from that moment on, a new family. But fate, relentless as ever, still had one last twist in store. Because inside Elias's coat pocket, there was a sealed letter addressed to Lorena. A letter that would change everything. Once again. The sun rose shyly that morning, as if it respected the silence that hovered over the house. Lorena sat beside Elias, still asleep and pale, holding the letter in her hands. The yellowed paper bore her name in firm handwriting. Her heart grew. Heavy. That wasn't just ink, it was a farewell. Or maybe a truth he hadn't found the courage to speak aloud. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and began to read. The first lines felt like a whisper rising from the depths of Elias's soul. If one day I can no longer explain things to you, let this letter speak for me. In his writing, Elias revealed something Lorena never expected. His trip to the town square that day was no coincidence. A week earlier, he had received an anonymous letter with a photo inside. In it, Lorena was holding Sophia in her arms. The note read, "She's alive, but she's not with you." The sender was none other than V, the man who had later appeared wounded. Elias wasn't sure whether to believe it, but his heart pulled him there. And when he saw her, surrounded by children, covered in dust and desperation, he had no doubts. Sophia was his daughter, and she was in the arms of a woman who looked at her with real love. I bought you not to own you, but to stop someone. Worse, from taking what was mine. At first, I thought of taking her back. Then, I just wanted to protect. Because I realized you were more of a mother than many who give birth, and then walk away. Lorena cried, unable to hold back the sobs. The letter went on. You taught me love has no price. That family is built with care. That silence can also heal. And then, in shakier lines as if he already sensed the end, Elias confessed, if I die, don't cry for me. Just take care of them. And if one day there's still space in your heart, forgive me for arriving too late. She pressed the letter to her chest, feeling the warmth of those words, as if Elias were whispering them beside her. He was still breathing weakly, but alive. And Lorena decided a letter wouldn't define their fate. She went to the bed, held his hand, and said firmly, You're not going to die. Because I haven't even said I forgive you. Or that I want you here, with me, with them. And there, in that hoarse confession born from pain, something new began to bloom. A new beginning. Crooked, scarred, but true. As the weeks passed, Elias slowly recovered. The children now called him Uncle, but Sophia, little by little, began testing the word Dad, like someone tasting a word until it finally makes sense. Lorena rebuilt the house with her own hands, helped by Elias and the small, determined hands of the children. The once cold farmhouse now smelled of baking cakes, echoed with laughter, and held the warmth of a true home. The neighbors, once distant, began showing up, bringing help, smiles, and stories that breathed life back into that land. One day, sitting under the shade of the mango tree, Elias held Sophia in his lap and whispered, You saved me twice. When you gave me a family, and when you showed me that there was still time. Lorena smiled, her eyes shining. And you gave me a chance to love again. And so, between free-roaming chickens, dirt-covered feet, and healing embraces, what had begun in despair and a desperate auction became a story of love, rebuilding, and destiny. Because sometimes, in the most unlikely place, with the most unlikely people, life decides to begin again. And if this story touched your heart in any way, if at any moment you felt like crying, smiling, or hugging someone you love, don't let that feeling fade in silence. Share this video with someone who needs to believe that new beginnings are possible, even on the darkest days. Subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss any of the stories that warm, move, and remind us that love can bloom even in the driest soil. And tell me in the comments, do you believe destiny can bring together wounded souls so they can heal each other? Leave a like, hit the notification bell, and let me know what was the most powerful moment of this story for you. Your interaction is what gives this channel life and what drives us to keep bringing you narratives that truly move the heart. See you in the next video. And remember, sometimes all we need is someone who looks at our pain and says, "You're not alone anymore." Pergantar, How ChatGPT.